If you want to know how much discrimination there is in a society, ask a child that has ADHD or a young person that grew up with ADHD, or ask the parents of such a child. Because ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is only recognized as a sickness for those that are privileged in society. If you live in this diaspora and you are Black, it's not going to be recognized as a sickness, but your child will probably be suspended, removed from mainstream schooling, or face other serious consequences. And I guess the same is for children in Africa who have ADHD and don't come from privileged homes. The teachers and the school authorities would only tolerate this behavior if the child comes from a privileged home. Then it will be accepted as a sickness or a health condition. But for poor children that are not privileged, it would just be seen as being unruly, lazy, and bad behaved. Hello and welcome to Afri Trends in Diaspora. Today I'll be talking about ADHD, how it presents itself in children, the pains that parents go through, and possible solutions, at least especially in diaspora. Thank you for coming on here. Please do press the subscribe button, and if you like it, also the like button. I have a son that has ADHD. He's a young adult now, but from the age of 2+, we knew that something was terribly wrong because we had to remove all the handles from the doors and the windows. Otherwise, he would have jumped out or run onto the streets. He was really hyperactive. And we were always being called to a series of meetings in the kindergarten. There were series of complaints in the kindergarten. When he got to school, in fact, before he even got to school, the headmistress called me because some parents from the kindergarten had gone to the school to complain they wouldn't want my son on that school. And I was able to show her all the tests I'd run on my son, that he does have ADHD and is in therapy. So she had to accept him on the school, but she was trying to insist that we put him on Racisim, but I rejected that. From the onset on school, the parents were standing there, were just waiting for my son to appear. And it was in the 4 years in the primary school, it was really rough. I had to get this welfare office to intervene because the parents were being really hard, telling their children to hit my child. The teacher was also being very discriminatory. So I had to get the authorities involved for my son to finish 4 years of school. But when he got to the secondary school, the issues escalated. And I had to change my son's school 5 times before he was able to finish secondary school. It was only later at the age of about 17, 18 that the problems really reduced and have, really reduced to a minimal. I've not been called to any meeting for the last 2 years. But all through his teenage and kindergarten age, primary school, I was in a series of meetings, series of conferences. The teachers, it didn't seem to make any difference that he had this condition called ADHD. For them, he was a hyperactive child, a child always walking around the class, a child who couldn't control his impulses, a child who can't concentrate on his schoolwork. So I always had these issues. And I must say, my son also had a slight learning disorder. So throughout the 4 years in primary school, I would have to go to school every day at the close of school, 12 o'clock, pick up the school work that was done that day, and take it home and go through everything with my son all over again. And that was the only way my son was able to complete primary school. Later in secondary school, he did get a bit better, but he still had problems concentrating and focusing. So it was a real rough journey for my child. It's a rough journey for most parents that have ADHD children. And it's especially rough and traumatizing for the children, because the children get excluded from a lot of activities. Sometimes even school outings or so, they would say, no, we wouldn't take the child along. The child may not be invited to birthdays. There are always parents trying to tell you, like, oh, your child is lazy. No, the problem is you don't discipline your child. Your child just needs a good spanking. So having a child with ADHD, it's not just difficult, it's humiliating. You have to hear a lot of things from different people. You are constantly under some kind of inquisition, like you are not a good parent. And you watch your child go through all this. You don't know how to really help the child, because you scold the child, it doesn't seem to make a difference. You make promises and promises. Oh, if you do this, if you behave just one day, I'll buy you this or that. It doesn't make a difference, because these children can't really help themselves. So what often happens is that the child is under so much pressure in school, because this child goes to school every day with this intention of today is going to be a good day. And the child goes, and the child gets the scolding, the child is disappointed, the child is confronted with failure. The child comes home, the parents are disappointed and angry too. And then often you let it out on that child. So the child doesn't even have a safe haven anymore. So any child you see having this condition, ADHD, don't just look at that child as lazy, ill-mannered, or badly behaved. Try to have some empathy and compassion for that child, because that child is going through a whole lot, and so are the parents. If you have a child with ADHD, you have to become an advocate for your child, because the only solution is working on yourself and working on the child. How do you work on yourself? You become an advocate for the child. You have to be able to attend series of meetings or conferences if the need be, to speak out for your child. You have to be able to seek professional help, and seek it before it's too late, because often when you approach such institutions or so, it takes time to get the ball rolling. So once you even start suspecting that your child has this condition, go to the doctor. You don't even need to tell the school. Go talk to your pediatrician, your doctor, and tell them what you feel, and let your child be tested. If there's nothing wrong with the child, good and okay. But if the child does have ADHD, at least you can start with a therapy, even if you don't consider medication. But the issue is that most of us African parents in diaspora, we don't want to think about going to a psychiatric doctor. We don't want to hear that diagnosis, ADHD. We just say, okay, our African children are active, it's like that. No, you have to become an advocate for your child. And when you attend these conferences with this school, these people are professional, they know what they are doing. They have your son or your daughter's behavior documented on a daily basis. So you can't go there and just come with lame excuses like, oh, my son doesn't do this at home or that. No, you have to be prepared. Seek help, especially professional help from doctors or psychiatric doctors, because these are the people that are going to write reports that will help your child. Because here in diaspora, when it comes to ADHD, nobody acts like it's a medical condition. The teachers, they've all learnt it in their school, but they don't care. They start with only consequences. They don't go back to their school book to know, what do I do with a child with ADHD? Can I put this child somewhere in the class, somewhere seated that he or she is not distracted? Can I pay more attention? No, they don't do all that, especially for the black children. All they're focused on is getting that child out. The child is a disturbance. So you have to be very active. You have to become an advocate for your child. You have to be ready to attend series of meetings. And you have to also really focus on that child. Constantly, like when the children are younger, you may find out you have to check the school bag constantly because their things are all scattered, all messed up. You have to constantly go through the school bag. You have to constantly go through the homework. Make sure the child does the homework, that the child has finished the homework. As I said earlier on, I had to go virtually every day and ask the teacher, what did you do in school today? What did my son finish? What is still to be done? Every day for 4 years, I had to keep bringing that home because that was extreme with him. So you have to become an advocate, you have to become a teacher, and you have to work on that child. Now, a lot of people will tell you, oh, the child is just hyperactive. What the child needs is to move, to run or so, to do sports. That is true and also not true. Because yes, children that have ADHD, they need a lot of movement to, get that energy out. But they have to also learn to sit still. So sometimes I used to practice with my son. Just would play a game. Sit down, put your hands on the lap. The first person to move has lost. I played that game with him so often. And it was tremendously difficult for him to just sit. Once tell him sit quiet with the hand, one movement or the other, he couldn't just sit still for 2 minutes. So you have to practice that with your child. Practice like painting, craft work, things that keep the child concentrated. Because ADHD children, they can concentrate when they are doing things they like if they like playing video games, they can be there hours on end concentrated. But once they have to do things that they are not interested in, they quickly lose interest. So keep trying in different situations at home to keep that child concentrated on things that are boring. At least that's what I did with my son, and it really helped. And also, what you shouldn't do with a child that has ADHD is show you are angry or show your emotions when they do something wrong, because these children, they want that attention. So if they notice that when they do things that are wrong, you give them that attention, they'll do it just to get that attention. So anytime my son would do something wrong or so, I try to keep very calm and talk to him in a very sober voice about it. Sit down and talk and talk and talk. And he would make a lot of promises, but the next day he won't be able to keep any of those promises. But constantly talk and talk with the child. And don't hit the child. I never hit my son. And I'm really glad about that, because my son, although he was so hyperactive, he had ADHD, he never one day hit any child in school. In fact, if he had done that, on the level he was, if he had done that, they would have expelled him from school, because here in diaspora, in Europe or so, they have ways of declaring children unfit for school. And that child will not be allowed to go to school again. You have children at 6, 7 years being declared unfit for school. They spend a year or more out of school. Then maybe they go to a special needs school or so. And you start noticing the signs when the teacher starts talking of reducing the hours your child attends in school. So I was really lucky that my son never hit anybody and was never aggressive. So at least, even though it was a battle, we had to change school, I was able to keep him in the school system. So instead of anger, disappointment, try to show compassion, love, and understanding, no matter how hard it is. Then for the child, automatically when you work on yourself, you're also doing those things that are right for the child. Seeking professional help. In fact, here in Europe, like in Germany where I say, they even have boarding houses for children that have such conditions, and the parents don't have to pay if the doctor certifies that the child has ADHD. So if it's so extreme and you can't handle the child at home because there's constant conflict with the other brothers and sisters or with the parents, you can think of the option of putting your child into a boarding school, at least for a period of time, even if it's some months or a year or whatever. Some children do really good on a boarding school, and being away from home in a new environment and with professionals, it really helps them. So if you are lucky and you get a school, a boarding school that fits to your child and your child is accepted there, that's also an option you can take in an extreme case. And lastly, whatever you do, don't believe what the teachers tell you completely, because there's a lot of discrimination involved. So, of course, they are going to be more irritated or annoyed when it's coming from a black child than when it's coming from a white child. So also listen a lot to your instincts. Listen a lot to what your mind tells you, because one thing about ADHD children is that they really have a sense of high moral values, let me put it that way. What is right and what is wrong is wrong. They are very loyal, and they are also very loving. So I can tell you that my son, he gave me the biggest challenges from all my kids. He gave me the most challenges, but he was, and still is really the most loving of all children. He would cook for me. He would, if I'm sick, he's the one to notice and say, "What's wrong with you, Mama?" So it's really worth your while fighting for a child that has ADHD and going on this long journey with compassion and love. Because these children, even when they grow up, they are going to return that love and compassion in such an amazing way. These children are so loving. They are so honest. They have empathy. They have compassion. So if you have a child with ADHD, fight the battle. As long as you don't give up on that child, God isn't going to give up on that child. Thank you for watching this video. I hope if you have a child with ADHD, that can motivate you to put in more effort, or to continue putting in effort, because it's really worth it. And please do share my video with anyone out there that this might help. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe.